how do you go about making a movie in Poland? Is it a consortium of financiers? Do you have to have the government on board? A lot of things are going on in Poland, and some of them not very good. Is it a good place to be making movies right now?
It's, oh, God. Creatively speaking, it's a good moment. Also because of all this turmoil and the political pressure. And the film fund, which we relied on, is still operative. You know, you can still get money from them. There's a tug of war over it at the moment, but it's not lost. And we got half a budget from the film fund, just under half a budget. We got it 2 years ago when it was still completely autonomous. The other bits and pieces came together from Britain, from France, from different regions where we were shooting. We shot in about 10 different regions of Poland, partly because we were very picky with locations, but also because there were local funds that could support us. So it's a great, you need great producer to bring it all together. You know, there were like, you saw how many sources.
The characters in this film are called Victor and Zula, and that is a name that is important to you because that's also the names of your parents. So when you were thinking about telling their story and maybe making a movie about their lives, at what point do you decide that you have to create a fictional story around them that incorporates part of their love affair, even if you're changing major details of it?
Well, I had to make it not them in order to not to feel inhibited, for one thing, and also the real stories, real lives are much more messy than this, even more messy than this. So I had to kind of free myself of that. My mother was a ballet dancer. I mean, she ran away to the ballet at 17, so there's some similarities. My father had nothing to do with music, so the music helped me remove them, these two characters from the story of my parents. And music is something that brings them together, keeps them together, and kind of defines where they are in the film. So I made a lot of changes, but the major kind of the mechanics of the relationship and the end, they've come from them.
At what time do you start talking to your actor to your left, because she has been now, this is her third movie with you. At what point do you and Joanna start talking about this role? And Joanna, what were your first questions about this story? Because it is obviously very personal to your director.
Yeah, we met 1 year or 2 years before the script was ready, something like this, or 1 year.
I think I just told you about the story, more or less.
About the story. That's why I knew that Pawel will create something very personal, but at the same that the music will be very important, and it will be like maybe not the musical, but the music is the third character in our film. And I was so happy that we had this conversation. And 1 year later or something, Pawel read me the script, sent it to me the script, and I read. And I was so happy because it was such a huge, big part, very great about, emotional and psychological process. But of course, I knew that I will lose my own voice, because this is Zula sing and dance. That's why I knew that I had to do very huge preparation about dancing, because I'm not a professional dancer. But I knew that this part is really for me, and I was so happy that this is for me. I knew that Zula, of course, she was the Pawel mother, but we created more like how to build a character. We didn't talk with Pawel, oh, tell me something more about your parents, or tell me, yeah, we were more about the acting process in this film and in these preparations.
And this is all of your singing throughout the film, correct?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Pawel, at what point did you decide this film would be shot in the aspect ratio that you shoot it in, and that it would be black and white? And even giving the colors, at what point do you decide that there's a way to evolve the contrast of the film, evolve the costumes, that even if you're shooting black and white, that you can start to change the look and feel of the film without making it color?
from the beginning. I mean, the immediate intuition was it should be black and white. I was less convinced about the square, but it's worked so well with the Academy format, but it worked well with it. I remember the advantages it had, you know, the way you can shoot portraits or double portraits, the way you can control where people look, and then knowing that this time we'll move the camera, how you can open up, you know, from very small to very big in one continuous take, you know, like in that scene on the river, for example, where you start very close on two faces. So that kind of limited perspective I like playing with in films. But black and white, for a while we toyed with the idea of doing it in color, just not to repeat ourselves. But it was clear that, you know, any kind of, well, Poland wasn't very colorful at the time. Let's say, like, it would have been, you know, how to do justice to Poland. No, so of course, okay, we could have used some kind of a Soviet-type Technicolor or imitated it, you know, but you know, with washed-out greens and reds. You remember these films from the, but it would have felt really contrived, you know. Whereas black and white doesn't feel contrived, at least to me. It feels like that world is kind of familiar to us in black and white, to me, from family albums, films, all sorts of things. But also, I wanted to make it as contrasty and punchy as possible, as colorful as possible, given that it's black and white. And actually, black and white gave us more opportunity to be expressive than if we played with colors. And yeah, so it's a kind of black and white. It starts a little bit less contrasty at the beginning, Polish countryside and so on. Then as we move to Berlin, Paris, it gets more contrast. You know, the look changes, but it was never like a strategy at the beginning. It was more what's good for the scene. You know, it was more trying to be, you know, to find the right kind of feel for each scene.
As you're working on this film, a lot is happening in Poland, not necessarily for the better. It's becoming a country that is having a lot of people who are feeling very strongly about nationalism and anti-immigrationism. Do you start to feel that the story that you're telling in the past becomes more contemporary, even though you weren't expecting that when you started this film?
Well, I'm not sure. I wasn't expecting. But there are echoes. But let's not exaggerate, you know. I mean, it's not all lost. Poland is still, you know, we can still make films there. People don't get arrested yet or shot, you know. So let's not get, and it's not, you know, it's 50-50. We're not giving up, you know. So and I think a lot of the time this government is trying to take over, you know, state TV. They took over the courts. They tried, but now they had to back down again. You know, all this kind of anti-abortion laws were about to be passed, and then people went into the streets and they were with, you know, so it's a tug of war, you know. It's not all lost, and you know, in these times people just have been shot, you know, so it's slightly different.
Pawel and Joanna, thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you very much.